tend to think that the word sigh is a sigh of relief, as in taking the other road, it has made all the difference for him, as in there had to be a difference in the road for him to choose for there to be a difference. They infer that difference is taken as a positive. But that can't be so, because we cannot infer difference when the speaker himself hasn't lived through the events and he hasn't been able to recall them. Now, my main criticism of this interpretation is that to interpret that that the poem advises is wrong, because the poem itself does not justify this idea. There are no real direct quotes or words that help justify that it advises, that it says, take the less traveled road. Now, don't get me wrong. The message is a beautiful message. It's a metaphor of life. We come upon a road every day, and we always have to make choices, and we always want to make the right choices. But the thing is that this poem isn't about that. But it's through that relation, through that understanding of that metaphor of life, that this poem has become so popular. In doing research, I found that most critics often believed that the poem was advising. Now, maybe I'm completely wrong. Maybe I don't know what the poem's about. But from what I've seen, the poem does not advise, and his use of diction clearly does not state advisingness. Yes, I just created a word. The second interpretation of the diction creates a completely different meaning, of which one I have never heard anyone say until I did some research, until I thought about it long and hard, and it made sense. The focus of the second interpretation is about not knowing how our choices now will be seen as later. Deep stuff. Still, a very good question, a very good statement, a very good meaning for a poem. Because we don't know how the choices we make will affect the future, or how we will view our present. Now, to get this interpretation, the word sigh is taken as a negative, as in knowing he will forget how the events occurred. Now, he's not saying that he will give a sigh of relief. He is sighing in the present, interpreting the word sigh as it is a sigh in the present, as in he knows now that in the future he will not be able to recall the events of the present. Yeah, that's trippy, I know. The speaker does not know how the future will look, and he cannot tell if the choices he makes now will make a difference. Difference is also taken as a negative, in the sense that he doesn't know. Also, the difference is taken as a negative because he knows in the future he will claim that the choice he made had made all the difference. He lies. He recalls a story and mistells it. He recreates it in a different manner. He does not know how his choices will be seen in the future, and that worries him. And it is a concern. We all want to know how our choices will be seen, or how they will reverberate in the future. The speaker, in this sense, is more concerned about preserving the present and not knowing how the events will look. Again, a negative is given to the sigh. Indifference, in the sense that he does not believe it himself. He will not believe the events he recreates in the future. And also, in following this interpretation, we see that there are no differences in the roads. which leads to him recalling the events in the future. Him recalling the events in the future lead him in the future to believe that there was a difference. And there is the false recreation, because there was no difference in the choice, because he did not know the difference the choice could make. The speaker is not a prophet. He does not know the future. Now, also, the poem in this interpretation focuses on preserving the present. Again, we go back to his use of specific diction that helps reinforce the idea of preservation of the present. His use of diction to create imagery. Yellow woods, grassy roads covered in fallen leaves. That morning equally lay in leaves no step had trodden black. Beautiful. I love it. But when he says these, his use of these creates an image, creates an everlasting picture, or does it? That's the point. The speaker doesn't know if that picture that he sees now will be remembered in the future, but he will want to recreate it. Preservation of the present, because we will not know how our choices will affect how we view our present now. A very deep meaning, but very different from the other interpretation. And I could see how one can easily misinterpret his words. And I could also see why this poem is so tricky. Frost, I gotta give it to you. You are right. It is a tricky poem. And you do have to be careful, because your use of diction, his use of diction, if interpreted in a certain way, can create very different meanings. Robert Frost's use of diction, specific diction, creates two very different possible meanings. But that's the beauty of poetry, isn't it? That the way we interpret certain things can create very different views. I love it. I love Frost. Amazing. Great stuff. Now, which one do I follow? Well, firstly, when I first began to analyze this, I thought that it was about taking the road less traveled. And I still think that is a great meaning. But looking at it again, I could see that there's a certain specificity that needs to be looked at. That his diction really does make a difference in the way we interpret it. And that's why it's so memorable. That's why it's so good. So there you go, people. There's my 2 cents on Robert Frost's The Road Not Taken. As a recap, 2 different meanings can be gotten by this poem and the way we interpret his use of diction. And that's what poetry is about. Being a wordsmith. Being able to use literary devices to create meaning, to create purpose. And he did that. So thank y'all for listening. I hope you enjoyed. And I'll see y'all around.